Okay. Okay, and Wanda and Sandy and Wayne, I've got y'all set up as hosts, so you should be able to share your screen and or anything that you need. I guess given another 3 minutes to get people. I know it's an early Saturday morning. To try to get some more people on. We will be streaming it and recording it. So so we'll have it for posterity. If anybody is uncomfortable with the idea of that, I would you can change your name in the chat and turn off the camera. I mean, I'll do what I can to respect people's anonymity if they feel so desire to do it. Okay. Everybody doing okay this morning? Are we good? Awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Okay. Okay. Okay, and I think before the question and answer session, I'm just going to mute everybody that's not presenting. The way that I think we're going to have it done is that I'll introduce what we're doing, and then I'll have Wayne Turner will be given some statistical information and general overview, and then we are very fortunate to have Sandy Rollins from the Texas Tenants Union, who is organizing out there, and I'm really excited to hear her speak. And then we have Wanda Hunter, who in Raleigh is been nominated for Do-Gooder of the Year by the week, and was probably the best candidate we had running in 2019 for city council. And then I figure we would open it up for a little bit of question and answer session. And when the way we generally do in Zoom meetings, and I'm not sure how many people are familiar, we'll do a stack. So if you have questions after the presenters are done, just type stack in the chat, and if you're on a phone or something, raise your hand. I don't know what the command is for it, but to get through, and then I'll try to follow up and get answers to anything that we can on Facebook, and follow up with that after we do it. So it's 6 minutes after. I've got 12 people on. Do we want to go ahead now and then hope they get out? Can we get a temperature check? And hopefully we can get everything out. Okay. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Bradley. Full disclosure, I am running for city council at large in, 2021, even though they're going to push it to 2022. This webinar was originally organized by my campaign collective, but other than that, it's not intended as a campaign event, and we're not asking for your vote. We are here to present information about tenants unions and residence councils. And it's going to be about tenants, landlords, and economic equality. Tenants unions and residence councils can push back against that. I've always said that it is a tool in the toolbox that tenants can use to push back against the injustices that are put upon them by the renter class. Let's see. I want to thank everybody for attending. We are streaming it on Facebook. I will be starting recording it very soon. So we'll have something to reference. As we approach the quarter century mark of the 21st century, debate over economic policy in the state continues to revolve around businesses and attracting businesses whose presence is assumed to provide jobs that will lift standards of living. But, you know, income inequality is persistent and is getting worse. And the cost of renting and home ownerships are rising much faster than wages. And at the same time, housing trends have shifted to market rate and luxury housing. And this is single family and multifamily construction. And consequently, housing costs consume a larger portions of income, which decrease the ability of families to save and invest in education, healthcare needs, fulfill life goals, and, you know, even have a place to live. And it is important, especially in this modern era, to fight gentrification in every way that we can and do what we can to help out as many people as we can because we are not going to make this a better society and a better world if we don't consider everybody out there. And there is no moral justification for the fact that we are the richest country in the history of the world. And at the same time, we have an order of magnitude more empty housing than we have people that that are unhoused. And with the rents going up in the city of Raleigh, it's getting harder and harder for people that work working class jobs in order to maintain residence and have a place to live. And when people work, they should be able to work and actually do something other than work, be able to have full and fulfilling lives without having every soul waking hour focused on acquiring money in order to pay rent. So that being said, I just want to let you know that we originally organized it. It was part of the campaign collective for Bradley for Raleigh Workers, which is my city council campaign. This is not as intended as a campaign event, and beyond this page and beyond this here, I'm not going to speak any more about it. If anybody's interested, you can check our website at bradleyforraleighworkers.com. But that is the last I am going to say about my campaign. Anyway, so we have three presenters today. We have Wayne Turner, who is going to give us some of the statistics and background. And then we are very fortunate to have Sandy Rollins from the Dallas Tenants Union on to speak about her experiences in the as far as in the tenants union in Texas and how it's been helpful. And then we have Wanda Hunter that is going to present basically the HUD equivalent of tenants unions, which are residence councils, which are actually included in the in the HUD charter. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Wayne, and I am going to be in the background watching, letting people in and stuff. And if anybody has any questions and earn to present, if you go to chat and either type a question, or if during the question and answer part at the end you want to type, just type stack in the chat, and then we'll see if we can get you to answer your questions. Anyway, thank everybody for attending, and we are recording. Over. Wayne?
Hey, Josh. So to begin, what is a tenants union? We hear a lot about it, but we need to have a definition of it. And the definition we are using is an organized association of tenants that fights for the right, human right to housing, its rent hikes, city zoning threats, poor living conditions, harassments, and convictions. Tenant unions exist in many major cities throughout the US, as we will see later. Tenant unions can redefine, they can reframe the problems of affordable housing, showing it for what it is. It's a humanitarian moral issue instead of one centered around the legalities of property and profit. Lack of housing is not the issue. It's that housing costs are beyond the reach of too many and consume too much income. It is a crisis of people in conflict with a society that places profit over human need. In reframing the issue from a dryly abstract crisis of inanimate objects to a crisis of living humans, tenants assume importance over the inanimate construct of the house or the apartment building. Tenants are people, humans that have jobs and responsibilities, families and aspirations. So their problems are social, they're not individual. Tenants experience consequences. Tenants can be torn from their housing. They can be exploited. They can be neglected. They can become unemployed and homeless through circumstance such as ill health or depressed economies. They can fall prey to broad economic trends driven by so-called market forces over which they have no control. Gentrification, the displacement of lower income populations as property owners seek higher profits, is a process that is driving higher housing costs. Tenants and homeowners in the triangle face challenges. They face rising costs in housing. Local governments are limited by both existing law and capture of the government by development interests. For too many workers, wage growth does not keep pace with productivity and is outstripped by the cost of rents and mortgages. There are no controls on these costs. The city of Raleigh, in its draft consolidated plan, which is an application for funding to the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development, acknowledges that the price of housing has risen faster than incomes, and that this problem is driven by growth. This growth has spawned an orgy of developer acquisitions of affordable housing, which are then raised or replaced or remodeled into high-end luxury properties. So the effect of this is to remove affordable housing from the market, and at the same time, it drives up costs for existing housing. Nationwide real estate and existing houses has become financialized as investment firms, which following the crash in housing prices in 2007, began to purchase single and multifamily homes at depression prices. So profit seeking from land speculation and rents have driven up costs of both types of housing. This has happened in manufactured housing communities as well as in traditional housing. Rents increase year over year. Since 1997, rents have increased nearly 300%. On average, until 2020, the graph indicates a 12.7% yearly increase. However, since the beginning of the pandemic, this graph also shows an increase of 20.3% from the beginning of the pandemic to the end of the first quarter of 2021. This is the median value across all census data, meaning half of the rents will have increased at a higher rate and half at a lower rate. For most people, wage growth has been restricted. This chart presents data about wage increases from 1979 to 2019. Has shown rates of wage increases between people in the 90th percentile and people in the lower 90% of the population have diverged radically from 1979. People in the lower 90% of the population, which is largely synonymous with the working class in the United States, have seen at best wage increases of slightly over 25% in over 3 decades. People in the 90th and 95th percentile of wage earners and above have seen increases of approximately 52% and 75% respectively. People in the 99th percentile see their wages increase by 160%, while people that are in the rarefied atmosphere of the population of the 0.1% of earners have seen their income increase by almost 3.5 times. I use the word earners somewhat loosely here because much of the wealth of these people is based on investments as opposed to wages. So people in the bottom 90% have not only experienced slower wage increases, but long periods of zero or near zero wage growth. There has been some increase in wage growth as the effects of the pandemic lessen, but that has been following a period of high unemployment and chaotically applied government support for the unemployed. Recent cuts to unemployment have forced people back to work without employers having to follow wage increases. One of the effects of the rising cost of housing is what is termed cost burdening. Cost burdening occurs when a tenant expends too much of their income on housing and utilities. For a renter, that begins at 30% of monthly income. If you spend over half of your income on rent and utilities, you're severely cost burdened. Cost burdening for a homeowner has additional expenses added into that definition. Raleigh, according to the city of Raleigh, there are 170,000 plus households that are either cost burdened or severely cost burdened. That includes homeowners as well as renters. When people speak about affordable housing, the costs are usually stated in terms of family incomes or including individual incomes that are measured as a percentage of the area median income, or AMI. You see this term everywhere throughout the literature. The AMI, the area median income, is determined by numbers developed by the US Department of Housing and Urban Development. The AMI changes with the size of the family. 53,000 per year for an individual is area median income. 100,000 for a family of 8. If a family or an individual makes less than 50% of AMI, finding affordable housing without being severely cost burdened is very hard. Evictions. Tenants face evictions, as we all know, and this is what makes the news most often. North Carolina has no shortage of eviction filings. Current eviction data in Wake County is not freely accessible, but we know that evictions, while not completely consistent from year to year, do not vary much. We expect that evictions will remain near the 2017 levels of roughly 12 evictions per 100 renters. In 2016, NC had twice the evictions of the national average. Of the top 100 cities in the US ranked by eviction rates, 8 of those were in North Carolina. But the state has plenty of company. Nationally, we see an average of 3.7 eviction filings every year. We know that during the pandemic, measuring from the spring of 2020, at least 372,000 evictions were filed. Evictions are not bloodless acts that are carried out within the confines of the legal system. Evictions have negative impacts on renters. In addition to displacement with its attendant physical difficulties, finding new housing is increasingly difficult. It may not be possible to find housing in the same area. And so people have to move away from their jobs, from their schools, from access to public transport. People who are evicted are marked. They are less likely to be accepted as tenants. They may have lower credit scores. And it's likely they will end up in lower quality housing, if not actually homeless. Tenants and their families, especially children, experience psychological stress. Their mental health suffers, their physical health suffers. So if you're an individual tenant and you're acting alone, no matter how determined you are, you don't have a lot of leverage against the landlord, and you have to bear the expenses of rent increases and legal proceedings alone. a tenant union or other cooperative effort is stronger. It offers the possibility of negotiation with landlords. It gives you a collective voice when considering and possibly opposing decisions made at the level of city government about development. Decisions made about permitting in one area can lead to evictions and rent hikes in adjacent areas as property owners see the possibility of quick returns justified by cost increases in new housing. A union can act to prevent evictions and negotiate payment of back rents. It can draw public notice to bad landlords and the problems created by rising housing costs. In short, it offers the power of many to help individuals in what can be a harrowing and destructive experience to find and to keep housing that is not a cost burden and to keep families and individuals from living in the streets. Tenants have successfully organized many cities across the US, and we will now hear from another long-time and successful organization, the Texas Tenants Union. And we have other references that we can make available to you later. Sandy, I guess I'll turn this over to you.
Okay, thank you so much. The Texas Tenants Union we're based in Dallas. It was formed back in 1973, originally as the East Dallas Tenants Alliance, by people concerned about substandard housing, gentrification that was starting, and abusive practices. And the neighborhood it started in, or the neighborhoods, there were a few, inner city neighborhoods close to downtown, older frame homes built in the 1920s with a small apartment complex sort of intermingled in duplexes. And the group started holding free tenants' rights workshops. And so people would come, when there were issues that at the apartment complex level, they were encouraged to organize. But it was out of that work, a member of the East Dallas Tenants Alliance had a case against their landlord related to the substandard living conditions. At the time, there was no repair law on the books. This case went all the way to the Texas Supreme Court that came down in 1978 with a decision that established the landlord's duty to repair for the first time. And so East Dallas Tenants Alliance were working with groups in Fort Worth and in Austin in order to get this law onto the books, not just case law, but into statute. The Texas legislature meets once every 2 years from January to May, odd numbered years. So we just had our session. But it was out of that work that they decided to form a statewide organization and incorporate as the Texas Tenants Union. So next slide. So since 1973, we've been doing workshops and until the pandemic, they were physically in our office, and then we were at various times in the history, we've had offices in other cities. Right now, our only office is in Dallas, but we do hear from people from all corners of the state. They call us, they're they join our online workshops, they become members of the organization and are part of our network. Typically these workshops would be packed, in-person workshops with people facing eviction, trying to get a security deposit back, trying to get repairs made, finding out something's on their credit report and needing to try to deal with that. So there's about a half-hour presentation going through leases, eviction, deposits, repairs, and then we'd have one-on-one counseling. I'm not an attorney, but I'm a trained counselor. And we did have attorneys who volunteered with us as well as other trained counselors who would volunteer with us. And the counseling sessions might be, just diving into the individual situation. Okay, you're going to court in 3 days, try to get an attorney from legal aid if you're eligible. If you're not eligible and you're representing yourself, then, here are, what you can say to try to defend yourself. Eviction laws in Texas are very, very landlord friendly, however, and so there's limited grounds to win an eviction case in this state. Right now, there is an exception because of the COVID-related protections that have been put in place, but just otherwise, it's a very landlord-friendly process. So we would often recommend tenants get a jury trial, which make things a little bit more complicated for a tenant in court, but generally would enhance their chances of winning. On a repair situation, it might be, helping somebody draft a letter, making a written request that they can send by certified mail or some other trackable form of delivery, which is the best way to trigger tenants' rights on repair issues. We also publish a handbook on tenants' rights that goes through these topics and more. We have form letters for common problems. If you're trying to get repairs done, if you're trying to get a security deposit back, if you're fighting excessive late fees, it's just fill in the blank forms to make it easy for people to stand up for themselves. We provide referrals for legal help, rental assistance if it's needed, and other services that tenants might benefit from. And then again, as for people who are facing eviction or wanting to take their landlord to court to sue for a deposit or to sue for failure to repair, we would help tenants on how to represent themselves in the Justice of the Peace Court, which is the first level of courts where these cases are heard. Next slide. So the other focus, so we have a tenants' rights education focus, we have a community organizing focus, and then we have a advocacy for better public policy focus. So in terms of organizing, in recent years, we've been focused on properties that are closing or at risk due to gentrification. And and these stories are on our website at txtenants.org on our Abouts page. But, like most of America, most major cities have seen a lot of gentrification in recent years. Any of the housing, near downtowns are often, taken over and redeveloped by developers. A lot of times these are older neighborhoods, and a lot of times it's the more affordable housing stock where people of color live. What comes to replace it is often luxury housing or high-end housing that not only removes the affordable housing stock for that particular plot of land, but has the ripple effect of putting pressure on the surrounding properties. And so, I mean, we've seen entire neighborhoods wiped out here, and I know it. It's not unique to Texas or Dallas. So we've helped tenants organize a tenant organization to fight back with varying successes, generally resulting in more time, generally resulting in relocation benefits, not resulting in most situations in people being able to stay. Although there was a long battle in West Dallas a couple years ago. They were small single-family homes, all very substandard. The owner decided rather than comply with city code, he was just going to shut down and kick everybody out. He gave everybody a 30-day notice. And this was a long campaign. The 30 days, the city actually did intervene in this case. And after about 8 months of packing courtrooms and city council meetings and having rallies and marches, he agreed to sell most of those homes to the people that lived in them. And so that was, at least an initial victory where most of those tenants were able to stay. The concern, however, is, now there's still a lot of high-end development occurring and encroaching upon, this older small frame home neighborhood, and their tax bills are going up. So there's going to need to be some tax relief for the low-income homeowners to prevent the displacement as that goes on. For a number of years, we also had a focus on trying to preserve at-risk HUD-assisted housing. And the properties I'm talking about are not public housing, but project-based Section 8 apartment complexes and HUD-insured apartment complexes. What happened was there were a lot of, hundreds of thousands of units nationwide built with HUD-insured mortgages starting in the mid-1960s through the mid-1970s. And they were 40-year loans, but after 20 years, if the owner wanted to pay it off and convert to market rate housing, they could. And Dallas was one of the first areas in the country where this was happening. And we got together with groups in other parts of the country where there had been, these conversions to, try to come up with solutions. Ended up getting a couple of different preservation programs out of Congress to try to preserve the affordability of these properties. And as a part of that, there was a priority in the law for sale to tenants or tenant endorsed nonprofits. And so, we helped, get some of these properties out of the hands of the people who, wanted to convert to market rate or wanted to tear them down for luxury housing into, more stable ownership. And then I guess the other organizing is just dealing with substandard conditions, or towing is a rampant issue here where, it's a predatory practice on tenants. And, and then there's just other, almost a common industry practice to treat people rudely. You want something, get out of my office or I'm calling the cops. I mean, this is, we hear that story over and over and over again. So I guess I'm ready for the next slide. So the other part of this is to try to address, the fundamental unfairness that, puts tenants at such a disadvantage, is to try to, get policies in place to protect tenants' rights and to have more affordable housing and public policy. So as I mentioned, the Texas legislature meets once every 2 years, January to May. We take that as an opportunity to try to, move tenants' rights forward. And over the years, over the decades, there have been, quite a few wins. There is so much more that is needed in order to have a level playing field. But, from the initial passage of the repair law, we got repair and deduct. We got a shorter time frame. It used to be when a tenant would sue for failure to repair, their case would go at the end of the docket. Now it comes up in 10 to 21 days, the same time frame that an eviction would come up. We've gotten limits on late fees. They need to be stronger, but they're there. We've expanded protection from retaliation, which was in the very initial repair law for tenants who complained about substandard conditions. But it now covers a list of things, but including establishing, attempt to establish, or participating in a tenant organization, which was a good win. And we've had other just basic protections: the right to a complete copy of your lease, the prohibition to waive your right to a jury trial in a lease contract, and others. But like I said, we've got a long list of things that we would like to see here. And we've got those listed on our website under policy recommendations. Likewise, because of our work with HUD-assisted housing, and because of the importance of those federal dollars in creating affordable housing, we've advocated, for full funding for these programs. And we've helped, along with a network of tenant organizations that are part of the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, expand the right to organize in HUD-assisted housing. This is something that would be great for private housing, but the right to leaflet, the right to door knock, the right to hold meetings on the property, the definition of a tenant group being completely independent from management and ownership, all very important recognitions that are now in the HUD regulations for tenants in the privately owned HUD-assisted stock. And I know public housing tenants also have have regulations addressing this. In some ways, theirs are better. I think in some ways, these are better. But again, the right to organize, extremely, extremely important to have protected. And then with the city council in recent years, it's primarily been Dallas that we've been focused on. There's, we don't have the capacity, unfortunately, to work everywhere that we would like to be working. But, last year when COVID hit, we got a grace period ordinance passed because that's something that doesn't exist otherwise in state law, which was very important. And we've improved minimum property standards codes at the local level. We've gotten the protection from retaliation for calling code enforcement in the local statute. So those are some of the things that we've worked on. Next slide. Do I have a next slide? Yeah, so, I mean, these are, I do have a next slide. So that some of the methods we use are, conducting door-to-door outreach. We use surveys, community meetings, tenant meetings. This past year, a lot more in terms of Zoom meetings or conference calls. We've done letter writing campaigns. We've, try to get tenants, in the room with their elected officials directly. We don't work just as advocates, but to facilitate the voters in the district telling their stories directly to the people who are in a position of authority to change a policy. Getting tenants to testify at the legislature or city council, again, extremely important that they see the face, they understand the issue, directly from the people impacted. When we can, and we've sometimes had to bring in lawyers to do legal challenges with, people do that on an individual basis, but we've also done it on a group level with tenant organizing to bring cases against the landlord, in some cases bringing case against HUD to get the changes that are needed. We've used protest, we've used press conferences or press events, all as a part of this as well. Next slide. So I wanted to just mention a couple things to make it fun. This is hard work. It can be demoralizing sometimes to see so much injustice, but it's important to hang in there. And the only thing worse than losing is not trying. So and if you can have fun along the way, then it's important to incorporate that because this stuff is hard. So this is before my time, but the RAT relocation program came about as a part of the organizing the East Dallas Tenants Alliance did. The city council was gonna require tenants to take responsibility for extermination, and and the conditions in the inner city were bad. So they started collecting rats in, like live rat traps rather than killing them. Little metal boxes where the rats, lived in cages, and took pictures of all these rats in cages and put them on a flyer and leafleted the nice parts of town where at that point, you know, the entire city council, I think, lived, or most of them. It wasn't single member districts throughout the city at that point. And it was, you know, these poor rats are living in the slums, you know, unless the city council, votes to improve conditions, we may find it necessary to relocate them into nicer neighborhoods. And, you know, call your council member, tell them to vote, you know. And you know, creative, effective, I think fun. We've serenaded landlords. My friend at the National Alliance of HUD Tenants is a great lyricist, and he'll take, you know, Christmas carols, nursery rhymes, you know, songs that are commonly known, popular tunes, change the lyrics. So, you know, one year we went to the vice president of a group called AIMCO. It was a HUD property where we were trying to get them to agree to sell the property to a nonprofit purchaser working in partnership with the tenant organizations. And so, you know, we took a giant Christmas card over there and, you know, sang AIMCO, the greedy landlord, to the tune of Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. You know, cameras in tow. So the guy wasn't home, or at least he didn't answer the door. But anyway, have fun, you know, use props and, you know, enjoy the process of trying to get justice. I think that's my last slide. Is there one? Oh, no, there's one more, sorry. So these are, I mentioned the National Alliance of HUD Tenants. That's a group that we're an associate member of. It's the organization itself is made up of tenant organizations in HUD assisted apartment complexes. So it's you know, the groups join the National Alliance of HUD Tenants, and then you know, there's a voting representative for each group. And they've done a lot of work in terms of trying to preserve the affordable housing stock. And there's a lot of groups in that network that work both with HUD tenants as well as private tenants. I think many of them are on the list that the Tenants Union of Washington State has. And that's where, you know, we know a lot of those folks from doing the HUD tenant organizing work. And then this other tenant.net, they're out of New York City, but they've got really good materials just on how to start a tenant group and basics of organizing. And, you know, some of it might have a bit of a New York twist to it, but a lot of it is generic enough to be useful no matter what part of the country you're in. So now I think that's it, but if I've got another slide, pass it on, but I think that's it. I think it's time for somebody else to speak. So thank you all.
Thank you, Sandy. That was a lot of good information. I really appreciate you getting on the call and sharing it with us.
Sure.
Let's see. Next up, we have Wanda Hunter, who is going to talk about specifically about HUD stuff in residence councils. And Wayne, if you could stop sharing your screen and get Wanda. You should be able to share your screen. And Wanda Hunter is, as I said, was the best candidate that we had in the 2019 election for city council. She has done a lot of work in the community and is actually nominated for the Indies Do-Gooder of the Year award. So I would encourage you to vote for her because she's an awesome person. And without further ado, I will turn it over to Wanda.
Good morning, everybody. Josh just asked about tenants unions, and as I sat here and listened, there was a lot of good information that was shared. And when Josh initially asked me about tenants unions, I was like, I have no idea what tenants unions are. I have no idea what they do. But I have lived in subsidized housing, and I have heard of residence councils. And so when Josh asked about it, I said, well, I said that's the capacity that I can help in is about residence councils and what HUD has outlined in their information about residence councils. So that's what I will be contributing today. So the residence council information comes under the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. They're Title 24, Housing and Urban Development, Part 964, Tenant Participation and Tenant Opportunities in Public Housing. And the purpose of that is to recognize the importance of residents' involvement in creating a positive living environment and in actively participating in the overall mission of public housing. So basically, they kind of have the understanding that it's important for residents to feel inclusive and have ownership to create a positive living environment. It's also amazing that how HUD outlines some of the things that like private tenants or like the states say that we don't have, that our hands are tied as far as laws are considered, and HUD actually gives some of those same things in their implications for tenant residence councils. So it just amazes me how everything that works with tenants like contradicts itself. So like the U.S. Department of HUD gives this thing, but then when you talk to the states, they say, oh, our hands are tied, you know, we can't legally do this or we can't legally do that. And so it's very interesting to look at those two things and how they contrast. According to HUD, the role of the Residence Council is, of course, to improve the quality of life of the resident, satisfaction and participate in self-help initiatives to enable residents to create a positive living environment for families living in public housing. They may actively participate through a working partnership with the Housing Authority to advise and assist in all aspects of public housing operations. This right here means so much. And I think that a lot of people that are in public housing under Housing Authority do not realize how powerful this is of what the Resident Council can do and the powers that they do have in reference to partnering with the Housing Authority and working with the Housing Authority and being able to leverage and negotiate with them because they are supposed to work in partnership. Along with the Residence Council, there's supposed to be a jurisdiction-wide Residence Council. So for instance, in Raleigh, we have several public housing sites. For instance, Heritage Park is one. But outside of that, there's supposed to be a jurisdiction-wide Residence Council. So for every Raleigh Housing Authority property, there's supposed to be an overall Residence Council that also convenes, and then each individual site Residence Council convenes. And with all of that convening going on, they're at some point in time also supposed to convene with the Housing Authority leadership. So the jurisdiction-wide resident councils may come together to form an organization which can represent the interests of residents residing in units under the Housing Authority's jurisdiction. This can be accomplished by the presidents of duly elected residence councils forming an organization, by residence councils electing a representative to the organization, or through jurisdiction-wide elections. So if duly elected residence councils form such an organization, the Housing Authority shall recognize it as a voice of authority-wide residents for input in the Housing Authority policymaking. So like Housing Authority doesn't have the authority to say, if these people agree or don't agree with the policy making, they cannot hands down say, we're not going to accept this, or we're not going to allow you to be a part of the policy making. They have to, if these residence councils come together the way that they are supposed to, which is outlined in HUD section 964, Housing Authority has to acknowledge this. They cannot just like nullify it and void it. They have to acknowledge this. And this is where the power lies within the residents. The jurisdiction-wide council may advise the board of commissioners and executive director in all areas of housing authority operations, including but not limited to occupancy, general management, maintenance, security, resident training, resident employees, social services, and modernization priorities. So for instance, right now we're looking at Heritage Park that is in the position where they are talking about repositioning these people and redeveloping Heritage Park. This is where this residence council or jurisdiction-wide residence council will come in play to have a voice to say about this modernization priorities. Well, since you want to redevelop or you want to modernize this particular site, here are the things that we see are priorities for this site. And those are the powers that these type councils hold. And then they can bring those to the table and say, these are the priorities that we see fit. And part C says the cooperation with other groups. There should be regularly scheduled meetings between the housing authority and the local duly elected residence council and the jurisdiction-wide residence council to discuss problems, plan activities, and review progress. And that was something that I mentioned earlier on. The resident council requirements, a resident council shall consist of persons residing in public housing and must meet each of the following requirements in order to receive official recognition from Housing Authority and HUD, and be eligible to receive funds for residence council activities and stipends for officers for their related costs for volunteer work in public housing. And those things are, it may represent residents residing in scattered site buildings, in areas of contiguous row housing, or in one or more contiguous buildings, in a development or in a combination of these buildings or developments. So, so this is how the representation happens. And at one point in time, we did have scattered housing through Raleigh Housing Authority. I'm not quite sure if that still exists at this point in time, but we did have scattered housing at one point in time. But these are some of the requirements of how the representation may take place. Part B, it must adopt written procedures such as bylaws, or a constitution which provides for the election of residents to the governing board by the voting membership of the residents residing in the public housing described in the paragraph B of this section on a regular basis, but at least once every 3 years. The written procedures must provide the recall of the resident board by voting membership. These provisions shall allow for a petition or other expression of the voting membership's desire for a recall election and set the number or percentage of voting membership who must be in agreement in order to hold a recall election. This threshold shall not be less than 10% of the voting membership. So these are just some of the things that in order to develop your residence council, you must have. And bylaws and election information is very important. And also under HUD's requirements, the housing authority has to assist you if you're trying to develop this residence council. They have to assist you with any of that. So like every resident is not going to be, may not be proficient in bylaws or the election of residents or the governing board or all these different things. So it is required that housing authority work with these residents to develop this if this is something that they want to move to. So it is required that they do this. They must have a democratically elected governing board that is elected by the voting membership. And at a minimum, the governing board shall consist of 5 elected board members. The voting membership must consist of heads of household, any age, and other residents at least 18 years or older, and whose name appears on the lease for the unit in public housing that the resident council represents. So those are those requirements. Now, HUD also has some policy that they have to adhere to in reference to tenant participation. So as far as like holding housing authority accountable. So HUD promotes the resident participation and the active involvement of residents in all aspects of the housing authority's overall mission and operation. Residents have a right to organize and elect a residents council to represent their interests. As long as the proper procedures are followed, the housing authority shall recognize the duly elected resident council to participate fully through a working relationship with the housing authority. HUD encourages housing authority and residents to work together to determine the most appropriate ways to foster constructive relationships particularly through duly elected residence councils. So HUD encourages the working together of the two entities, the Housing Authority and the Residence Council. HUD also has a policy on resident management. Now, resident management is the forming of a nonprofit in order to manage certain sites that are under Housing Authority. And in Raleigh, we have a specific situation that's going on right now with our Housing Authority and some resident management issues. So it's HUD's policy to encourage resident management. HUD encourages housing authorities, residence councils, and resident management corporations to explore the various functions involved in management to identify appropriate opportunities for contracting with a resident management corporation. Potential benefits of resident management entities include improved quality of life, experiencing the dignity and meaningful work, enabling residents to choose where they want to live, and meaningful participation in the management of the housing development. The specific situation that we have right now does not fall under this policy, and is as I was doing the work to create this PowerPoint, it was amazing to me to see how many contradictions in which Housing Authority has done in reference to their resident management that they're trying to implement at this time. So I think that's something that we'll be revisiting with them at their next board meeting here in Raleigh. And so that was just a small snippet. I didn't want to get too far in the weeds because I know it's a short presentation and it's early on a Saturday morning, and I know people want to enjoy their Juneteenth. But I did just want to give some outline information about residence councils and you know, what they are, and just to give like I think there was like a synopsis of like the power that they hold. And so when people understand how much power they hold and how much influence they can have on different decisions that they make in reference to where they live, how it's maintained, security, safety, training, all of these things are already outlined under HUD. I mean, as far as even the officers getting stipends, like people don't know this. So with Housing Authority and some of the funding that they receive funding per unit, and it allows for stipends for their officers that are elected to residence councils. And these people could be deciding on like, what is the security measures that we use in our community? You know, what is a priority or something that we don't have over here that we would like to have that we could utilize in our community? And they can exercise that, and they can make Housing Authority come to the table and negotiate with them on getting those things in their own community. So they actually have ownership and they actually have power, but it's just about getting the information to the people and showing them how to utilize it and exercise it for the benefit of their community. Thank you, Josh.
Thank you, Wanda. And thank you, Sandy, and thank you, Wayne, for being on this call. It was a lot of good information. And I guess at this point, we'll take questions. If you have a question, either type it in the chat or type the word stack in chat, or you can just type the question in stack if there are any questions. And so I would like to thank Wanda Hunter, and I would like to thank Sandy and the Texas Tenants Union and the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition for being on and helping us get the word out. So now, does anybody have any questions that they want to bring up to anybody that spoke? Just either type stack in the chat or raise. I think there's a hand raising function on this, and if we have any questions, I think that tenant organizing has historically happened in Raleigh. I don't think and I think hopefully it's going to be starting again, and hopefully we can get it going. And it looks like Wayne, you are on stack.
Hi, thank you. I had a question I wanted to ask Wanda. I understood from your presentation that apparently HUD deals with a housing authority. It doesn't administer properties directly. But I also understood from Sandy that in Texas, at least, there was the possibility of privately owned HUD housing. In Raleigh, is the housing authority a government or is it a private entity?
So housing authority is kind of complicated. Housing authority is a private entity, but the members of the board are usually appointed by the mayor, but their funding comes from federal dollars.
Okay. So is there any public housing in Raleigh that is privately owned?
Unless you're referencing like Section 8, where they utilize like private owners own a property and they accept Section 8 vouchers.
Okay, yeah. I was just, the reason I brought that up is because after listening to Sandy, I thought maybe there were possibilities of HUD housing that could be sold out from under the tenants, and I'm guessing that's not the case here.
Okay, yeah, public housing is publicly owned by public housing authorities, although there have been, I mean, I guess there's a few different funding streams to subsidized housing. So the first, big program was public housing, and the Housing Act of 1937, I think, is where that stems from. In the 60s, they came up with these public-private partnerships, and so they decided to provide low-interest HUD-insured loans to facilitate the development of affordable housing. Those properties were rent controlled. They had to; those owners had to go to HUD if they wanted to get a rent increase, and the rent increase had to be budget based. Although there was still a profit mechanism in there for the private developer, and a lot of those properties ended up having project-based Section 8 contracts put on top. So there was some mechanism for an affordable rent, but it was actually, I think, Nixon that came up with Section 8. And so there's both project-based Section 8, where the subsidy is tied to the development. And a lot of that came from the original HUD insurance program, Section 221D3, Section 236. None of that has been built. And I think all of that, the 40 years are long gone. Some of them have been preserved through these preservation programs. And then the other properties that have project-based Section 8 are Section 202 for the elderly, Section 811 for people with disabilities. And so those, these programs, the HUD insurance and the project-based Section 8 is tied to private owners generally, although there's a few exceptions where the Public Housing Authority owns, took over a property with project-based Section 8, and that's still the funding, subsidy there. But, and then the third program that people seem to know a lot about is Section 8 vouchers. And so that's where the tenant gets a piece of paper from the housing authority, goes and tries to find the landlord willing to accept it. Voucher discrimination is a huge problem in our state and probably in others. Many states and jurisdictions have prohibited discrimination based on source of income, often defined as including having a housing voucher. But not here and not many other places. And in fact, when the city of Austin expanded their fair housing ordinance to protect voucher holders from discrimination, the Texas Apartment Association, which is the landlord's trade group, went to the legislature, the next year and said, we need you to prohibit cities and counties from doing this. And so now, we've got this state law that prohibits cities and counties from doing it. It's one of many what we call Mother May I laws in the state, where, the legislature, local control is great unless they don't like who's controlling the local, so if you've got a progressive local government, you know, Jim, Bob, and Bubba down in Austin, you know, say, no, you can't.
Thank you.
And it looks like Charles is on stack. So Charles, go ahead.
Hey, yeah, thanks. First of all, thanks for everybody who presented. This has been really great to have this conversation. I actually have two questions. I will ask my first one. If there's not another stack, I guess I'll ask my second one if that's okay. So the first one is, I guess for everybody, maybe Sandy, I would like to hear your experiences. Are there different strategies or success stories according to the type of landlord, that being, you know, sort of large national landlords, investment companies versus sort of smaller local landlords who might own any number of units?
Yeah, well, I'm trying to think. I mean, we've probably, I mean, we've had success with both, and of course we've had our frustrations and you know, not the out victories we've had with both. But you know, going after a local developer or landlord that doesn't own a ton of housing that you can get to is, you know, I think, you know, probably a little bit easier. Although there was a situation, Aimco is, and I think they've sold off a lot of their stock, but so when the original HUD insurance programs, you know, again, it was a 40-year loan. After 20, with the way the original law was written, if they wanted to prepay that loan and convert to market rate housing or tear it down for redevelopment, you know, there was nothing to stop that. And the organizing work that we did along with others in other parts of the country led to, in 1997, something called the Emergency Low-Income Housing Preservation Act. And then it was replaced in 1990 with something called the Low-Income Housing Preservation and Resident Home Ownership Act. That was designed to incentivize the you know, staying into the affordable housing program and provide a mechanism to sell the properties to nonprofit and tenant purchasers. So Aimco came in when, you know, they were a real estate investment trust, I think based out of Denver, Colorado, but there was a huge portion of the stock that was actually developed by the National Housing Partnership, which was created by Congress, I believe. It might have, you know, I used to have all these details in my head and some of them have leaked out. But nonetheless, you know, a huge inventory of these properties were owned by something called the National Housing Partnership. And when, you know, the deregulation was on the horizon, Aimco came in and acquired all of the National Housing Partnership stock, you know, with the goal of, you know, cashing in on this government and taxpayer investment program. So we went after Aimco or we helped tenants at this property in a place called Kaufman, Texas, which is, you know, in a county about 30 miles east of Dallas, small town, where the Aimco had acquired from NHP. They had a Section 8 contract on the property. These properties, if the tenants pay for their own utilities, are supposed to get a utility allowance to cover the reasonable cost of electricity and gas. It's supposed to be reviewed periodically. In this case, Aimco and you know, NHP, you know, hadn't adjusted the utility allowance. And so, you know, there were people living in this property that, you know, they wouldn't run their air conditioners. We got triple digit heat, you know, they can't afford the bill. They're saying, you know, this is supposed to be affordable housing. Why can't I, you know, cover this? Why can't I, you know, I can't afford it. And it was because the utility allowance was like $33 a month. And it had been that for a couple decades and hadn't been adjusted to keep up with the actual cost of utilities. But the utility allowance is sort of a hidden hidden factor in how a rent is determined, because it's not a check that somebody gets, it's deducted off the tenant's portion of the rent. And so, you know, it's one of many numbers on this spreadsheet that, you know, is easily overlooked. And so, you know, that's where we had to bring in attorneys to represent the tenants at the Village of Kaufman. It ended up being a class action case. It ended up getting them, you know, 4 years of retroactive of, payments, you know, thousands of dollars. It was a meaningful amount to the people who live there. And it also led to changes in HUD utility allowance policy, a couple different rounds of changes, so that, you know, people weren't falling through the cracks in this way. So that was, I guess we took on ENCO at that particular apartment, and which, you know, I'm sure ENCO didn't make that mistake anyplace else, because they, you know, well, I'm guessing that they you know, were probably much more careful in adjusting utilities, you know, after that case, and after HUD made it harder for this to be, you know, hidden in the background. But I don't know if that fully answers the question, but
yeah, it is helpful. I think we know Raleigh, like everywhere else, is experiencing more and more real estate investment trusts purchasing large complexes. And I think the data is clearly showing that those types of national landlords are evicting people at much higher rates, especially Black and other minority sort of prominent complexes and apartment buildings. And so, yeah, it's good to hear. Thank you. If it's okay, I can ask my second question.
Yeah, go ahead.
So this relates to any sort of solidarity between tenants unions, I think Wanda residents councils, and those residents of community land trust and or housing co-ops. There is a sort of nascent land trust in Raleigh. I don't believe it empowers the residents to the highest degree, although there is owner resident representation on the board. It is not full representation on the board. So just wondering if any of your, you know, in anybody's experiences, have you seen solidarity between co-ops, CLTs, and tenants associations? And has it been helpful? If so, or do you think that would be helpful, such that there's this sort of umbrella organization or umbrella collaboration between different types of collective housing tenants?
I can speak to that for a minute, Josh.
Okay.
Well, I mean, Wanda and or Sandy may have specific examples, but as to the value of them, I think the value would be obvious, because anytime that associations addressing the same issue are splintered, they're also reducing the power of their collective voice. And the more people we have working on housing issues, and the more they're talking to each other, the better in general. I will point out that the current Raleigh City Council has gone a long way toward abolishing the possibilities of that cooperation in the current environment by destroying the community advisory councils and proposing to replace them with various entities described in the report they commissioned from, is it Michael Fern? I can't remember. But there's no action in that direction. So I would think that for tenants in Raleigh, for which to the best of my knowledge does not have an existing tenant union, that tenant unions and the Wake County group and any other support group that opposes tenant rights would have a natural interest in creating such an umbrella organization. Over.
Yes, I would.
Oops, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Juan.
Go ahead, Juan.
I was just gonna agree with Wayne. And yes, with abolishing CACs, it's hard to get community engagement when you don't have an entity that's out engaging with the citizens. And the report from Mickey Fern just, I would say, revised the report that we had already given to him, because we'd already done the research on the progress and what was needed for CACs as far as citizen engagement. And he just gave it to us reworded. They never made a definition of what citizen engagement was. And when you think about it, when you have an external and an internal task force for citizen engagement, and they are not communicating nor sitting at the table for what this citizen engagement is going to look like, then there seems to be a problem. So our current council is not concerned, they wouldn't bat an eye at like a tenants union or a residents council, to say the least. I mean, you can tell by their reactions at city council meetings as it is now, barely giving people 2 minutes to talk about issues that, that are going to impact us for decades. And the way that they respond to some of the commentary that we get back, I think is indicative of what they care about the citizens right now. If you ask me to describe them, I would say they're self-serving opportunists, and they don't care about the citizens. They are cared about lining their pockets. So that's just my 2 cents.
Sandy.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Texas is pretty far behind on some of these affordable housing tools. So Houston, I think, is farther along in terms of creating community land trusts. It's been discussed here, but it's not really a tool that's been really implemented. Likewise with housing co-ops. So, I think, co-ops and giving tenant ownership, I think, is a really important tool that we've advocated for. Washington, D.C. has something called the Tenant Opportunity to Purchase Act. I think it's, I know Berkeley was looking at it. I'm not sure who else. I know New York City, while not having that, I don't think they have an ordinance like that. They certainly have had groups working to help tenants form cooperative housing in New York City. And I think it's an important source of, an anti-displacement tool, and something that love to see more of. We've had bills introduced into the Texas legislature that to try to have a right to purchase. It's been a concept within these and a tool within these, some of the HUD programs, but it's not something that's common for private housing.
Thank you, Sandy. Any other questions? Rosa, did you have a question?
No,
okay.
No, I have a question. I was just saying I agree with Wanda Hunter's statement.
Awesome. Okay, if there's any questions, type stack. And if not, I just wanted to mention a couple of things. Like we had this webinar in order to basically describe some opportunities that we can use to push back against the gentrification. What it's going to take going forward is to actually start the conversation, which is already going on. It didn't start with this webinar, to try to build a good coalition to help organize people in Raleigh. And fortunately on the call, we've got representation from Wake County Housing Justice Coalition who do fantastic work. I would check them out, but I think the plan is to not have this not be the last one, and actually try to touch base with interested groups to get together and get on the same page and get together and try to form groups to get out and help people organize and get the information out to people. So I would really like if anybody is with an organization, is interested in this work, to try to form, keep in touch with us and keep in touch with other aligned groups so we can see what we can do to get it together. It's really important now that we do what we can to push back, because the eviction moratorium, unless they extend it, and I can't imagine the powers that be are going to extend it past the end of June, which will put us on the verge of the worst housing crisis probably in recent history. It will make 2008 look like only a few people were hurt, which wasn't the case. 2008 was a terrible year, and this can only be worse. So we need to have as many tools as we have in our toolkit in order to push back against, housing push out, against gentrification and that kind of stuff. So I will be sending I've got everybody that registered. I've got your email, and I'll send out an email. And if we want to talk, I know I'm pretty sure the DSA is doing work in this regards as well. I think we've got some members on the call here as well. And if everybody can, if they're interested, reach out to whatever organizations there are and see if we can get together and form a united front. Again, if we do it again, it won't be under the auspices of the campaign. So I did not intend this to be a campaign event, but what can we do? Because event. Wanda posted in the chat, Livable Raleigh, which is a group in Raleigh that are having an emergency meeting to discuss what's happened with our city council. Yet gave themselves another year of unelected service, quote, service. If the governor signs it, and I can't imagine that he will veto it, they are going to push the election for city council in Raleigh back until November 2021, not only pushing it back by a year and a month, but also making it a non-plurality, or making it a plurality election. So in theory, somebody could win with 20% of the vote if there are enough candidates. So which isn't representation. November 2022. It was October 2021. And if there aren't any questions, I know there are people on the call. Does anybody have an event that they want to pitch today? I know there's some Juneteenth events going on in the city. I know at Fruit of Labor there's a film. I think Wanda Coker, do you have an event? You've got an event today, right? Am I incorrect?
Yes, I do. Thank you, Josh. Hello, everyone. We're having a Juneteenth celebration at Method Road Park, which is off of Method Road across from Rich Park Apartments, from 4 to 6:30. It will be in the Pioneer Building, which is the Kelly O'Berry, I think I'm saying it right. If I'm not, forgive me, building, but it's the Pioneer Building at Method Road Park. If you can find a park, you'll find a Pioneer Building from 4 to 6:30. Please join us. We'd like to see you. Okay,
I'll plan on being there. I can't speak for everybody, but
yay!
Just try to get y'all stuff. And if anybody else has anything that they want to pitch while we're on the call, I know that at Fruit of Labor, they're having a film night and fish fry for Juneteenth. I think it's at 6 or 6:30 at Fruit of Labor Cultural Center. I'm going to try to make that as well. But does anybody have any more questions? And is everybody okay with me getting an email from me at some point in the near future saying, hey, let's work together and organize something, so when we have our next webinar, we can have tactics and plans and try to get out and see what we can accomplish to get this done. And again, I'm sorry, I'm not really anybody as a person, but so if I tend to mumble, I apologize. Uh, okay, Sarah, you're on stack.
Yeah, first of all, thank you everyone who spoke. That was phenomenal. And I'm in Austin, so Sandy, thank you so much for responding to my email and coming. I appreciate it so much. I am part of the anti-war working group along with Josh. And on Wednesday, it's not explicitly about Juneteenth, it's about kind of oppression in general and destabilization of different countries. And it's kind of going to focus on American destabilization and oppression and the rejection of democracy, even though, of course, America claims to support it. And if anybody would like to join that, I'm going to put the registration in the chat, and I hope to see people there. Again, thank you so much, everyone who spoke. I really appreciate it.
You're on mute, Josh.
See, that's me. I'm sorry. It probably sounds better when I'm muted, but everybody, thanks everybody for getting on the call. If there aren't any questions, I guess we can wrap it up.
Rosa's on stack.
Oh, Rosa? Oh, sorry. Rosa.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
No, that's
so I'm sorry I came in late to this meeting, but I did hear you talk about, gentrification, and I definitely agree with what Wanda Hunter said. And I'm just wondering, and I am not able to join every week on the Wake County Housing Justice Coalition calls, but I know that, some of the focus, I think that focus on the developers and kind of getting in the way of this rabid rush to make their millions is a good thing, right? However, I think that there's a whole other group of people, and this really came to me because, my son, as we were driving to work, he's like, don't these people get it? So he's looking at the consumer end of it. There are people buying those houses that, Black and brown communities are getting run off from, right? So I wonder if there isn't something that folks can start talking about, basically in all communities, but particularly white communities, because it's the white community that's gentrifying, kind of calling out folks for, there should be some consequences that don't, at this point, even if there's social consequences, it should not be something that just, oh, well, there you go. But these, I see neighborhoods that used to be Black and brown neighborhoods, and now they're, really high priced homes. The rental market is displaced, and signs on those yards saying Black Lives Matter. I mean, that really is offensive. It really is offensive. The fact that you can say that, and yet what your actions, what your involvement is in this process just goes unnoticed because, the bad developers. Well, if they don't have people to sell to, then they're not going to make their millions. It's not a given that, they have to sell their homes. We need to lift up the fact that white people are coming in, displacing entire communities, making it very difficult for people to have rental housing, and nobody cares about their actions in it. I think we need to, counter that with folks talking about how shameful that is. I'm sorry, it's shameful, period. Or as Wanda Dilber Coker says, period. There's just no question about it, So anyways, that's it.
Oh, that was awesome. I agree 100%. There is nothing more ironic than somebody buying houses limited. tearing it down, putting up a McMansion, and then saying that somehow they're not the bad guys, which is weird. Wanda Coker, you're on stack.
Yeah, I thank you, Rosa, for that. That was very, very necessary to say. And even to the fact to where I know in here in Southeast Raleigh, one of our city councilors, and then there's another city councilor, both of them call themselves progressives and, you know, all these names to cover their whiteness. And they are gentrifiers. You know, there are others who have moved in the community and, you know, they go under the title, oh, well, you know, we're YIMBY, we, you know, yes, in our backyard, so it's okay. For us to move in and do what we're doing in the communities. You know, I call them out, but I feel like Rosa too. I think white people need to call out white people for their wrongdoing and educate them more so than we have to have that burden on us to always educate other races. That white people should be educating each other, and those who know better hold those accountable if you have any family members or whatever, but call them out and let them know that you are wrong and I'm not going to visit you or something like that. But yeah, I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Rosa.
Yeah, I most definitely agree. We need to make people understand that they're complicit, regardless of what the signs in front of their McMansion say, that you can't really say that if you're complicit in it. Because Rosa was 100% right and Wanda was 100% right. We need to, make efforts in order to call that out when we see it, especially people that are born in the unfortunately privileged class need to do a better job of holding other people accountable. Over. Does any exactly, Black community, all communities matter more than McMansions. Whether they're communities of color, whether they're working class communities in general, McMansions as a general rule are just terrible. Terrible. James, I've got you on stack. Go ahead.
Hey there, everybody. Thanks so much for all this. This has been fantastic. I was just curious if there was kind of like a short link that could go on flyers for that has all this information, or a place for people to input their information if they're interested in getting involved more. And if there's not, we could talk offline about, maybe getting that together, because I do a little bit of website development stuff. And so just let me know.
Yeah, that would be awesome. I know that Wake County Housing Just Coalition does a lot of good work in that area. I'll be sending an email out to everybody that was on this webinar, along with a copy of the slides. Is it okay if I send your slides, Wanda, as well?
Yeah, I'll share them with you.
And which has some information on it, I'll add some links. I think Autonomous Tenants Union Network has information. I know the Texas Tenants Union has information on organizing. And I'll get that out there, and if it's okay with everybody, to send it out, and yeah, I would be interested in having an see if we can get some of our groups together to organize and get it out. Have a working, at least communications, and if not another coalition to work. But I would say, is it okay, Sandy, if we send out the slides that you sent us as well?
Sure.
Awesome. And we'll, so I'll be sending that. And, you know, James, if you don't mind, it might be a good idea to reach out to Wake Housing Justice Coalition, Hawaii's Point the Link. I know they're already organizing, but if they want to take the lead, I'm willing to do it. I'm willing. I mean, it's not about me. So, yeah, I think it's a push that we need to get. I know there are several organizations that are working on it. I'm most familiar with Wanda and his work, and I know the DSA is actually making a push as well along the same lines. And I mean, so is my campaign for what we can do. So anyway, so I think the plan is it might not be today because I'm going to try to hit some Juneteenth celebrations, including Wanda's, but possibly tomorrow since I don't have any plans and it's Father's Day, and I should have enough time between. I think my kid wants to play video games tomorrow, to send out an email to everybody and try to get everybody in, you know, on the same page. And just bear in mind that we would like to do another webinar in the future. We want to put together a strong coalition about organizing, and I want to invite groups that weren't on this call because, you know, because it was kind of rushed. I mean, this webinar got kind of pushed back and then pushed up because of the moratorium. So we want to make sure that, I mean, because the moratorium is, but we want to, when it comes down to organizing, it'd be, I'm going to try to reach out to people that have experience organizing in Raleigh as well, in addition to the people that I've already reached out to. But again, I'm not here to lead anything. I'm just here to put out the information and get it together. There are people that are better connected in the community than myself, and I'm here to support 100% of the time. And let's get to work. I hope that answers the questions. Anybody else have anything other than Happy Father's Day tomorrow, Happy Juneteenth today, and it might have me branded as weird, but I would say that comrades, it's been awesome.
Thanks, Josh. Thank you, Sandy and Wanda, and hope to talk to you soon in the future.
Okay, thanks everybody. Hope to see you soon. I will be sending an email, look for it tomorrow, and then we'll see where we can go from here. And oh, just so you know, it was streamed to Facebook and it is recording. If anybody wants a copy of the recording, let me know. If you go to Facebook, I streamed it from the campaign, and I think that it was Wake County Housing Justice streamed it too, so it should be there as well. So if anybody has any questions, you know, going forward, or wants to use it as a reference, as far as I'm concerned, use it as you want to. And I will also try to get posted on YouTube somewhere as well. So thanks everybody, and solidarity, and thank you.